It was supposed to be the summer of their lives. Camp Nightingale, nestled deep within the Ozark Mountains, had opened its creaking gates every June since 1951, promising freedom, adventure, and a place where the outside world disappeared beneath the pines. Parents called it rustic, kids called it magic. That summer in 1978 was no different. 62 campers arrived, wide-eyed and sunburned, ready for lake swims, ghost stories, and marshmallows burned over open flame. Cabin 6 was reserved for the oldest kids, 13 of them. Boys and girls, ages 11 through 13, sharing one cabin on the edge of the forest where the tree line grew thick and the ground sloped toward something that felt older than the camp itself. They were the popular ones, the brave ones, the ones who snuck out after lights out and whispered about the counselor's secrets. On July 18, everything changed. The morning bell rang at 7:00 a.m., just like it always did. But when Counselor Beth Mallory came to Cabin 6, the door was open, not wide, just slightly ajar. The beds, 13 of them, were empty, neatly made, no backpacks missing, no shoes disturbed. A single flashlight sat on the floor, its bulb still glowing weakly. At first, they thought it was a prank, a hike gone rogue, but minutes became hours. A roll call revealed the truth. All 13 campers from Cabin 6 had vanished in the night. No one heard a scream. No one saw a shadow. No one had any idea how it could have happened. Panic surged through Camp Nightingale like a forest fire. Police were called. Parents were notified. The camp was locked down, but it didn't matter. Cabin 6 was empty, not ransacked, not looted, just untouched. 13 sleeping bags, 13 pillows, 13 kids who no longer existed. Within 48 hours, the camp was evacuated. Counselors wept in the mess hall. Some refused to return to the forest. Others left their uniforms behind and never spoke of the place again. Camp Nightingale was shut down indefinitely. Local legends bloomed like fungus. And for 27 years, no one knew what happened to the children of Cabin 6, only that they were gone. Without a trace, without a sound, just silence. The first 72 hours were chaos. Ozark County Sheriff's deputies arrived by dawn, flanked by volunteers, forest rangers, and concerned parents who had driven through the night. Helicopters took to the skies within 24 hours, their rotors chopping through thick mountain mist as they scanned treetops and trails, searching for any sign of movement. Dogs were brought in, trained 9s, that had tracked missing hikers and escaped convicts, but in the forest, around Camp Nightingale, their noses found nothing. No scent trails, no torn clothing, no footprints. Just damp moss, pine needles, and the overwhelming quiet of something ancient holding its breath. Divers searched the lake. Murky, still, and cold, its dark waters gave up nothing. The old dock creaked as rangers leaned over it, peering into the green-black depths as if the lake might whisper an answer. Camp records were pulled. Names checked, but everything was in order. The 13 children had arrived, had eaten dinner, had been seen at evening campfire. After that, it was like they were erased. By the 5th day, fear had morphed into dread. The FBI took over jurisdiction. Theories circled like vultures. A mass abduction? A group runaway? A ritual gone wrong? Nothing made sense. Cabin 6 showed no signs of forced entry. No scratches on the windows. No broken locks. Just the beds perfectly made. Some of the sleeping bags still warm when Beth Mallory found them. One counselor, eyes hollow from lack of sleep, muttered about hearing singing in the woods the night before. No one believed her. Another claimed she saw faint lights dancing through the trees just after midnight. She was told it was a dream. Flyers went up. News reports ran hourly. A map of the surrounding wilderness was pinned in the sheriff's office, covered in red string and black pushpins. Search parties formed grid lines and marched through thick underbrush with whistles and radios. But every search ended the same way. Nothing. Not even a scrap of fabric. Not a thread. The forest didn't give back what it had taken. After 3 weeks, The official operation was scaled back. The media moved on. And the case of the 13 missing campers faded from headlines, tucked away in cold case drawers with other unsolved nightmares. Only the families remained, waiting, wondering, dreading the silence that never spoke back. Years later, the footage is grainy. VHS lines flicker across the screen. A boy with freckles and sun-bleached hair stares into the camera, chewing the sleeve of his hoodie. "We thought it was a joke," he says, "until it wasn't." These interviews, recorded in the early 1980s as part of a local documentary that was never released, capture the haunted expressions of Camp Nightingale's remaining campers, those who slept in cabins 1 through 5. Most were younger, 8 to 10 years old. Their voices wavered. Some refused to speak. Others told stories that were dismissed as imagination, but looking back, it's hard not to see the warning signs buried in their memories. We'd wake up and find weird drawings on the trees. One camper, now an adult, recalls little symbols scratched into the bark with rocks or something sharp, circles inside circles, like eyes watching us. Another mentions a boy in cabin 3 Mason, age 9, who started sleepwalking 3 days before the disappearance. One night he was found outside, barefoot, standing at the edge of the woods, murmuring words no one recognized. He said he was following the whispers, his counselor remembered. But when we asked who was whispering, he said, "The ones who live between the trees." Beth Mallory, the counselor who discovered the empty cabin, never gave another interview. But in a taped session with police, later leaked, she described hearing a low hum that night. "It sounded like singing," she said. "But not happy, not human." She never returned to the camp. Some survivors developed anxiety disorders. One boy refused to sleep with the lights off for over a decade. Another girl, Sarah, was found years later with a journal filled with sketches, stick figures standing in a circle, holding hands, always drawn under tall, crooked trees. She was 8 when the campers vanished. She never spoke about it, not once. What happened that night in Cabin 6 wasn't just a mystery. It was a scar left behind in the minds of those who stayed, a silence that followed them into adulthood, a shadow that crept into their dreams and never quite left. And in every recollection, one phrase comes up again and again. We felt like they were being watched. Not by people, by something older. The silence didn't last long. Within weeks of the disappearance, rumors began to slither through the cracks. Not the kind you read in official statements or hear from law enforcement press conferences. These came from the woods, from locals who'd lived near Camp Nightingale for generations, who remembered things that others had forgotten or had chosen to ignore. The first whispers were simple. Maybe the kids ran away. Maybe they got lost in the dark and panicked. But as time passed, the theories twisted. Parents started receiving strange letters in the mail, no return address, no stamp, just placed in mailboxes like they'd been delivered by hand. Each one said the same thing. They're not gone, they're chosen. Some letters were scrawled in childish handwriting. Others were typed, all of them anonymous. Campgrounds that bordered Nightingale were avoided after dark. Hunters reported finding symbols carved into trees a mile deep in the forest, interlocked triangles and concentric rings, too precise to be random. An old park ranger claimed the land the camp sat on used to be sacred, native burial grounds, he said, long before the cabins were built. They warned the developers, he told a reporter, in 1980. But no one listens until the ground swallows something. Some believe the answer lay underground. A 1954 survey map, found years later in county archives, marked a series of abandoned tunnels from Cold War-era drill spart of an old military project no one ever followed up on. The camp was built directly above them. Officials claimed they collapsed. Locals weren't so sure. More chilling were the stories of other disappearances, scattered, never linked together officially. A hiker in 1962, 2 brothers in 1949. A Girl Scout troop in 1931 that was rerouted and never photographed again. These cases were dismissed, buried under paperwork and forgotten names. Until 1978, when 13 campers vanished at once and the pattern could no longer be ignored. The theories multiplied: cult activity, underground communes, shadowy government projects, but none stuck. Because there was no evidence, no one to blame, no answers. Just a cabin full of empty beds, a forest that grew thicker every year, and a name that no one dared speak near the old trailhead: Cabin 6. By August 1978, Camp Nightingale was no longer a camp, it was a crime scene, a name whispered like a curse on local radio stations and national news broadcasts. The FBI took over the investigation, arriving with polished shoes, briefcases, and the quiet confidence of people who believed every mystery had a solution. But Camp Nightingale would teach them otherwise. They combed every inch of the property. Interviews were conducted, timelines reconstructed, behavior analyzed. Cabin 6 was sealed off, cataloged, studied. The FBI brought in profilers, experts in cult behavior, even a forensic linguist to examine the anonymous letters. None of it led anywhere. The case became a media sensation. 13 vanished, they called it. Headlines screamed about lost innocence, about evil hiding in plain sight. But after months of searching, they had no suspects, no motive, and no physical evidence. Just missing children and a community unraveling. By early 1979, the story began to fade. News anchors found new tragedies to report. The FBI filed it under unsolved, pending information, and moved on. Camp Nightingale was sold off quietly to a private owner. The gates were padlocked, the signs taken down, the trails overgrown. But not everyone could let go. Some families tried to move on. They packed up bedrooms, folded blankets that hadn't been touched since July, and placed photos in drawers they couldn't bring themselves to open again. Others did the opposite. They became obsessed. One father, Robert Kemple, quit his job and spent 2 years camping near the site, interviewing former staff, digging through old camp records by flashlight. A mother, Eleanor Marsh, had "Have You Seen Me?" flyers printed every 6 months, updating the photos with age progression sketches that grew more haunting over time. Support groups formed, theories circulated, books were written, but no answers ever came. The years passed, the voices grew quieter, and eventually the world did what it always does: it forgot. Time has a way of erasing sharp edges. What was once a national tragedy slowly faded into a historical footnote, the kind mentioned in lists of unsolved mysteries or recounted in eerie podcasts late at night. From 1978 to 2005, Camp Nightingale aged like a scar beneath the trees, still there, but harder to see unless you look closely. Seasons changed. The cabins rotted. Moss covered the wood. Trails disappeared beneath tangled brush and silence. A place once filled with campfire songs and swim races became a hollow graveyard of memories. By the late 80s, most locals didn't even mention it anymore. The camp wasn't haunted, it was worse. It was forgotten. But not by Rachel Givens. Rachel had been 19 when she served as a junior counselor at Camp Nightingale, Cabin 2. She remembered their faces, their laughter, the way the kids from Cabin 6 always pushed curfew. She was the one who braided Anna Weathers' hair the night before they vanished. In the years that followed, Rachel built a life marriage, divorce, a career teaching history, but one ritual remained. Every July 18th, she returned to the site, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with a notebook, always alone. In the quiet of the forest, she walked the perimeter, mapping it over and over. She'd say it was to honor them, but deep down, she was still looking. And then, patterns began to emerge. In 1993, 3 scouts vanished from a different summer camp in northern Vermont. In 1987, 5 children disappeared from a youth hiking program in Idaho. In 2001, 2 siblings went missing on a church retreat in rural Georgia. Each case separated by years, by miles, by circumstances, but all with similarities too strange to ignore. Remote locations, no physical evidence, groups rather than individuals, and always unexplained silence where the answers should have been. Rachel started keeping files, drawing connections. She reached out to other families, most of whom were too tired to listen, but she saw it. A thread weaving through the woods, pulling something invisible across decades. In 2005, she returned once more to Camp Nightingale, her steps slower, her faith thinner. She stood near the crumbling ruins of Cabin 6 and whispered the names out loud like a prayer. And somewhere, deep in the trees, something listened. July 12th, 2005. It was a Tuesday. The kind of humid summer day where the air clings to your skin and everything smells like rain-soaked earth. Travis Mayfield, a 37-year-old amateur botanist from Little Rock, had been hiking alone near the edge of the old Camp Nightingale property. He wasn't looking for anything unusual, just rare lichens along the ridge where the forest thickened and the trail thinned to almost nothing. He'd wandered off course, bushwhacking through decades of overgrowth, when he saw something strange protruding from beneath a mat of moss and crumbling pine needles. At first, he thought it was a rusted-out drainage pipe, but as he cleared the debris, his hands scraped across cold metal square, flat and framed like a door. A hinge, a handle, a hatch. The thing was old, warped, bolted into the ground with rusted brackets. He used a stick to pry it loose, and with a groan that sounded almost alive, the hatch opened. Beneath it, a metal ladder descending into total blackness. The smell that wafted up was stale, metallic, and wrong, something between rot and dust. Travis didn't go in. He backed away, heart pounding, and called the sheriff's office from his truck a mile down the road. By sundown, the site was swarming with deputies, federal agents, and a forensic response team from Little Rock. Floodlights bathed the forest in artificial white. A portable generator hummed as men in gloves and suits climbed down the ladder, flashlights flickering against damp walls. What they found underneath the Ozark soil would unravel 27 years of silence in an instant. The space beneath Camp Nightingale wasn't just a cellar. It was a chamber, a corridor, a bunker, and it had been there the whole time. The hatch was resealed that night. The area marked off with caution tape and patrolled until morning. No official statements were made. The authorities needed time to understand what they'd just found, and more importantly, how deep it went. The legend of Camp Nightingale wasn't just coming back, it was opening its mouth. They called it a containment structure in the initial report. But once inside, no one could ignore what it really was. A bunker, constructed of reinforced concrete and steel, 12 feet below the surface, cold as a crypt. The main room was roughly 30 by 40 feet, low ceiling, fluorescent lights that had long since blown out. Along the perimeter were military-style cots, thin, rusted frames still holding remnants of bedding, wool blankets folded with a kind of precision that felt out of place in the wilderness. Then came the supplies. Canned food stacked along one wall, most of it labeled in faded government-issue packaging. Water tanks, a backup generator, a shortwave radio long dead. Everything arranged with order, almost obsessive, as if someone expected to live down here for a very long time. And maybe they had. But the real discovery was carved into the concrete itself. Along the far wall, etched with what looked like a nail or a knife, were names. 13 of them, one beneath the other, each in a child's handwriting. The last names matched Camp Nightingale's official records. The missing 13, some were written shaky, like by a hand too young or too scared. Others were carved with anger gouged in deep, underlined again and again. Below the names was a date, 1986. Investigators found no bodies, no blood, but they did find drawings, hundreds of them, pinned, taped, or scratched directly into the walls. Most were simple, trees, stars, suns with smiling faces. But others were more disturbing, circles of figures holding hands, eyes drawn over and over, a large black shape looming behind children who stared straight ahead, unsmiling. In one corner was a small pile of broken pencils and charcoal, a child's art station, abandoned. Nearby, A tattered Forest Grove yearbook from 1978, its pages warped and damp, was opened to the last known group photo of Cabin 6. The image was half erased by mildew, but the faces were still visible, still smiling, frozen in time. There was no sign of who built the bunker. No blueprints, no fingerprints. The structure wasn't on any map. Its existence had been erased or hidden, but the message left behind was clear. They had been here, and they had survived. For a while. The deeper the investigators dug into the bunker, the more the walls seemed to speak, not with sound, but with memory. Hidden in a rusted metal trunk beneath one of the cots were 6 notebooks, water-damaged but mostly legible, each one filled with the cramped handwriting of a child. The journals read like diary entries. Day counts, schedules, desperate hopes. "We had oatmeal again, no spoons," Rachel cried. "I gave her mine." "The lights don't turn off anymore. He says we are in dark now." "Ben won't wake up. We're not allowed to say his name." But it wasn't just the writing. 2 shelves in the back corner held old VHS reels and magnetic cassette tapes, some labeled by hand, others unmarked. A technician carefully threaded one of the video reels through an archival projector brought on site. The screen flickered to life on the side of the bunker wall. Grainy footage. A single fixed camera angle. 13 children seated at long folding tables, eating in silence. No one speaking. No one smiling. A child stands slowly to scrape leftovers into a metal bin, glancing once at the lens like they knew they weren't supposed to. On the audio tapes, a voice spoke. Deep, calm, male. "This is your world now. The surface has ended, but you are safe, you are chosen." The voice appears over and over in the journals, always called the same thing, the caretaker. Drawings on the walls begin to make more sense. Not just children's art, ritualistic patterns, diagrams of their living space, instructions. One page ripped from a journal showed a hand-drawn version of the most disturbing detail investigators had found, so far a symbol etched into the back wall in black marker, a circle of interlocked hands surrounding a pyramid. It showed up on notebooks, on the undersides of the cots, even scratched into the inside of the hatch door. The symbol wasn't part of any known cult or religion. It didn't match military iconography, but it was everywhere, and always paired with a phrase whispered through the bunker, captured faintly on tape. "We are the link. He is the shape." The voice haunted them, low, deliberate, unnervingly patient. In one reel, it's reading what sounds like rules. 1. Speak only when spoken to. 2. The circle must remain unbroken. 3. If one leaves, all suffer. No name, no face. Just that voice, echoing through a mounted intercom speaker in the bunker's ceiling. On another tape, the camera captures a punishment. A child stands alone in the center of the room while the others sit motionless on their cots. The voice asks questions. "Why did you break the link?" The child trembles. He doesn't answer. The tape ends abruptly. There's no sign of physical abuse in the footage, no screaming, just obedience. Total mechanical obedience. The caretaker's presence loomed not through violence, but through control, routine, isolation, fear sharpened by silence. The children weren't just surviving, they were indoctrinated. But it wasn't until federal agents began reviewing the audio tapes that something shifted. One of the senior field techs flagged a tape with the label "Wet Am." On it, the caretaker speaks more informally, as if rehearsing. "They need to believe the surface is gone, that I am all that's left." He clears his throat, then continues. "Remember, eye contact breaks the spell." The strange phrasing caught attention, but it was the voice itself that rattled someone unexpected. Rachel Givens, the former junior counselor who had returned to Camp Nightingale for 27 years, was asked to review the recordings. Midway through the second tape, she stopped breathing. Her hand went to her mouth. She whispered, "I know that voice." Agents leaned in. "Who is it?" She hesitated, staring down at her lap. "He wasn't staff, but I saw him once. He was around, always on the edge of things. Visiting from the county, said he was an inspector or something." She couldn't remember a name. Just a man in his 40s with 2 white teeth and cold eyes who asked a lot of questions and never signed the visitor log. She remembered because he made her uncomfortable, because when he looked at her, she felt small. Facial recognition software ran against staff archives and local law enforcement registries, but came up blank. Whoever the caretaker was, he hadn't just vanished after 1986. He had erased himself. Completely. Of all the journals recovered from the bunker, one was different, smaller, cloth-bound, tucked beneath a loose floor tile beneath cot 4. Its pages were brittle, its spine cracked with age and moisture, but the ink was still legible, painfully so. It belonged to someone named Lacey. The name appeared nowhere on Camp Nightingale's official roster. But in the back of the yearbook found in the bunker, there she was. Lacey Moreau, age 12, cabin 6. Her handwriting was careful, the words chosen like someone trying to be brave in the dark. Day 123, I miss Mom's lasagna. Rachel says if we stay good, we'll get to write letters soon. Day 314, they call it cleansing. I don't like the dark room. Day 607, Jared cried today. They made him sleep in the corridor. And then came the final page. June 15, 1986. They said we're ready. The gate will open soon. We packed our things. I hope I get to see the sky again. He said we'll feel different, lighter. I believe him now. I don't feel afraid anymore. Not really. That was the last entry. No more pages. No more drawings. Just silence. Investigators believe that whatever happened to the children, whether it was orchestrated escape, removal, or something more sinister, culminated that summer. The timeline suggests they were kept in the bunker for nearly 8 years. But then came the grave. In the rear left quadrant of the bunker, beneath a heavy concrete tile painted black, cadaver dogs signaled. Forensics unearthed a small burial, a shallow pit lined with makeshift stones, covered with a child's torn sleeping bag. The remains were partial small bones, cloth fibers, and a single bracelet made of woven yarn. DNA confirmed the identity. Benji Strauss, age 9. He had been one of the 13. There was no note, no marker, just a body hidden where no one was supposed to look. The rest of the children, if they ever left no sign. But the presence of that grave whispered something chilling. Not all of them made it to the gate. The bunker raised more than just questions. It sparked a chain reaction of classified whispers and locked doors. Among the debris was a rusted metal filing cabinet, sealed shut with a padlock so corroded it took 2 hours to cut through. Inside were paper documents, mostly ruined by water and mold, but a few had survived. Hand-drawn maps, tunnel schematics, engineering diagrams stamped with the U.S. Department of Defense seal, circa 1959. One document, dated August 14, 1961, referenced Site C9 Communications Relay Node, Ozark Sector. Another was simply titled Behavioral Compliance Protocol, Youth Subjects. Investigators quickly realized the land Camp Nightingale sat on had a history long before it became a campfire destination. In the late 1950s, it was designated as a Cold War communications outpost, part of a nationwide system of subterranean bunkers and relay stations designed to withstand nuclear attack. Most were decommissioned or repurposed by the mid-60s. Some, like Site C9, were quietly sold to private developers. Except Site C9 was never listed in the public records. The redactions began immediately. FOIA requests were stonewalled. Pages arrived with entire paragraphs blacked out. The Department of the Interior claimed the land had been privately owned since 1973, but refused to confirm who the buyer had been. The county registrar's office reported their archive for that period had suffered water damage. Even satellite records from the 1980s were mysteriously missing frames, images digitally scrubbed from federal databases. But one phrase kept surfacing in margins and footnotes, circled in red: Subject Linkage Experiment, Phase 2. It was never explained. No files confirmed what Phase 1 had been. or whether Phase 2 had ever ended. But one thing was clear. The bunker wasn't improvised. It was planned, engineered, funded, and then forgotten or buried. Some believed it had been sold off and repurposed by fringe groups. Others whispered that it was never sold at all, that it had always been operational, hiding in plain sight. The only thing more terrifying than who built the bunker was who let it stay hidden. The news coverage reignited everything. For the first time in 27 years, the disappearance of the Camp Nightingale 13 wasn't just a mystery, it was a headline. As the story spread, so did the theories. Paranormal investigators, true crime obsessives, Reddit sleuths, all dissecting the bunker, the symbol, the tapes. And then, just when the noise threatened to drown out the facts, something unexpected happened. A tip came in, anonymous at first, just a voicemail left on a state hotline. I was one of them. I was there, but I can't talk unless you promise they can't know I'm speaking. The number traced back to a woman living in rural New Mexico under an assumed name. She agreed to meet only once. No cameras, no recording devices, just a conversation. She introduced herself as Ruth, though it wasn't her real name. Early 40s, thin, restless. Her hands trembled when she spoke. She identified details from inside the bunker that were never made public, like the missing tile beneath cot 4, the phrase, "he is the shape," and the pattern of mealtime bell tones. When shown photos of the journal entries, she nodded quietly. "That was Lacey's handwriting," she said. "She used to write poems on the walls." But when asked the most important question, what happened after June 15, 1986, she fell silent. "I can't tell you," she whispered. "They're still watching." She wouldn't say who they were, or how she escaped. Only that some of them were taken deeper. That the gate mentioned in the journal wasn't a metaphor. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "I wasn't supposed to leave." When pressed, she panicked. Her final words before disappearing again were barely above a breath. "We were never missing. We were given." To this day, she's never come forward again. But her fingerprints match those of Sarah Kellerman, one of the 13 from Cabin 6. She was alive. At least one survived. But if Sarah was hiding, what was she hiding from? It began subtly. A Reddit post in 2007 from a mother in Bozeman, Montana, sharing her son's disturbing drawing. Crayon on construction paper, 13 stick figures standing in a circle around a black triangle. At the top, in blocky handwriting, "They're still underneath." She thought it was just a weird imagination thing. A one-off. 2 years later, a carving was discovered on a wooden post behind a playground in Eugene, Oregon. Almost identical, a circle of interlocked hands surrounding a triangle. No initials, no explanation. Just the symbol. Freshly etched, as if someone had done it the night before. By 2011, the symbol had been spotted in at least 5 U.S. states, always near the sites of recent child disappearances, chalked onto sidewalks, scratched into park benches, painted onto rocks in dry riverbeds. Authorities dismissed it as copycat behavior. Online forums called it a meme. But the details were always the same. The shape, the number 13. And a phrase, now appearing again and again. "We are the link." When shown the Montana drawing, Sarah Kellerman, still using the alias Ruth, went pale. She wouldn't touch it, wouldn't speak. She simply nodded once and pushed the paper away. "It's starting again," she said, "or maybe it never stopped." The FBI quietly opened a pattern recognition case in 2012. They didn't announce it to the public. But internal memos later leaked revealed they were monitoring over 20 open missing child cases with overlapping details. Remote locations, no physical evidence, final sightings near wooded areas or decommissioned military sites. One memo included a question scribbled in the margin by hand. Is it one group moving, or multiple, trained the same way? Another memo asked simply, what is the purpose of the circle? No answers, just more questions, more silence. Whatever the symbol meant, It was no longer contained to the walls of a buried bunker. It was surfacing, whispering, watching, and it wasn't finished. Even now, after months of excavation, analysis, and classified briefings, investigators admit they've only scratched the surface literally and metaphorically. The bunker beneath Camp Nightingale was just one structure, one hatch, one door. Satellite imagery re-examined with modern thermal mapping revealed something chilling: subtle heat anomalies in the surrounding hills, lines, shapes, depths, not natural. Subsurface radar confirmed it. There were other cavities beneath the forest floor. Parallel structures, some sealed, some possibly collapsed. At least 4 more suspected entrances within a 10-mile radius. One of them buried under a collapsed rockfall. Another under what used to be a picnic area. But no further entry points have been successfully opened. Not yet. Search teams work in shifts now, quietly and under heavy security. Officially, the area remains restricted due to environmental hazards. Unofficially, it's something else, something layered in silence. When asked for comment, one FBI spokesperson simply said, "We're still assessing the scope." Behind the scenes, even hardened field agents have reported feeling off around the site: compasses spinning, comms flickering, strange interference on static radio channels. One tape recorder left running near the original hatch door picked up a voice no one remembers hearing in real time. A whisper, almost too soft to catch. "Don't close it, it's still open." Across the country, parents with missing children have begun reaching out, not just from 1978, but from every decade since. Names that never made the news, files long shelved. Some mention symbols their children drew, others swear they received letters they were too afraid to keep. The same handwriting, the same words. They're not gone, they're chosen. But the truth, if there is one, remains buried. And then, there was the real, unmarked, found in a sealed box in a dry cavity behind the wall of the main chamber. At first glance, it seemed blank. But as the film technician hand-threaded it into a projector, grainy images flickered to life-shaky camera movements, a child's point of view. The lens pans slowly across a row of cots. A journal on the floor, a hand reaching for the light switch. Then darkness. A voice breaks the silence. Soft, young, certain. "We're not lost, we're waiting." The reel ends. The screen goes black. And somewhere, far beneath the Ozark soil, the circle remains unbroken. This story was intense. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.